Last month, I slept with a bear in Baldur's Gate 3. I, like every other gamer girl of taste, happily turned in my gaming bachelorette card to get down and dirty with good cop Turi and Garrus. But try as I might, and I did try, I couldn't hook up with any other species in Starfield.
Why am I like this? What is it about non-human romance that has me analyzing every dialogue choice in search of the one that makes the good cutscene roll? I'm Emma Fife, and this is Reality Check. Getting your game freak on isn't a new concept. Video game romance found its origin in visual novels, beginning with 1982's Lolita Yakuken, in which players would rock, paper, scissors with a girl until she was naked. This is not a euphemism. 1994 saw the release of the first Otome game, Angelique, wherein romance was the core game mechanic. Meanwhile, player-controlled romances had already made their sextacular debut in RPGs, like 1992's Gold Box Dungeons & Dragons game, Treasures of the Savage Frontier, laying the groundwork for later series wherein social interactions and romance were central to the plot, like Persona and Fire Emblem, which are basically just dating sims if you play them the way I do. Then, in 1999, the greatest year in cinematic history, Sarah Michelle Gellar convinced her stepbrother, Ryan Felipe, to seduce Reese Witherspoon in exchange for sexual favors, and BioWare became the poster child for in-game romance when the Baldur's Gate expansion, Tales of the Sword Coast, included an optional flirty side quest that ended with a lil smooch. 14 years later, they released an enhanced version, which included limited but deeply explored romance options, like hunky half-orc Dorn, who's down to clown with anyone so long as they're the player character, and probably explains why I include a sexy half-orc NPC in all of my D&D campaigns, you know? Sometimes you do research for a video and you learn stuff about yourself in the process. Of course, this brings us to the horny and/or scaly meat of the problem: the non-human romance option. Lots of games let you get down and dirty with non-human persons, but let's start by examining everyone's favorite elevator riding simulator, Mass Effect. Full confession, I was late to the Mass Effect train, and while I knew that Garrus was the internet's dinosaur bird husbando, I was not prepared for how sexy I would personally find him. I mean, I went into the game thinking I could fall in love with Caden, since, you know, he's voiced by the same guy who voiced Cartho Nassi from Knights of the Old Republic, who I literally bonded with a roommate in college over how much we loved him. However, the moment I set eyes on that chiseled mandible and enviably slim waist in Mass Effect Legendary Edition, something latent stirred inside of me. Couple that with his disarmingly courteous manner juxtaposed with his absolutely lethal combat skills, and that was it. It was Turian or nothing. Okay, yeah, so I immediately hooked up with the consort when I arrived at the Citadel, but it wasn't serious, okay? We love a monogender Dasari babe who is down for a good time. And we all know Liara is the only elite romance option in OG Mass Effect. Obviously, I'm not the only one who caught feelings for Garrus. In a 2022 Reddit AMA, Drew Karpyshyn, who wrote Knights of the Old Republic and the first two Mass Effect games, shared that he was totally blindsided by all the love for Garrus in the first game, so when it came to Mass Effect 2's expanded romance options, decided to give the fans what they wanted. You know what? I take it back. Maybe the internet is a good thing after all. Same goes for Tali, another original Mass Effect non-romanceable squad mate, though Karpyshyn's main hang-up about her was her weird feet. Might reveal more about him than he necessarily intended, but you know what? No shame. This trend continued outside of the Mass Effect series. For instance, Dragon Age Inquisition, another BioWare title, is so pro-species mixing that there's literally just one dude who won't hook up with anyone other than another elf. What's your freaking problem, Solus? On the Bethesda side of things, games like Fallout 4 offered players the ability to romance whichever romanceable character they desired. Furthermore, since the definition of romance was not confined strictly to a monogamous relationship, the sole survivor could actually get with everyone, if they had that kind of time and energy. Plus, romance was not limited to human characters, though Curie, the Miss Nanny unit, can be housed in a synth that is basically a perfect human woman, still a robot. But you could actually sleep with a robot in Fallout New Vegas, sort of, so it's pretty normalized in that particular post-apocalypse.
Please assume the position.
And while the logistics of actually consummating your relationship with an irradiated ghoul might be a tad complicated, you can't deny that Hancock can get it. Obviously, Skyrim offers a veritable buffet of scaly, orky, and pointy-eared marriage options, but marriage in Elder Scrolls lacks the satisfaction that comes with hours of carefully considered dialogue choices and fully immersing oneself in a parasocial relationship with an AI. There again, the fantasy of completing a task being the only prerequisite for marriage to whatever floats your boat is honestly no less valid. Coupling between humans and non-humans dates back to some of the oldest storytelling on record. It's literally been a topic of human interest for over 3,000 years. In Greek mythology, Zeus assumes the form of an animal a bunch of times for really messed up but topic-appropriate reasons. Pasiphae, who was cursed by Poseidon to experience lust for the Cretan bull, went so far as to get master craftsman Daedalus to make her a cow suit so she could mate with it. This resulted in the half-man, half-bull Minotaur, as well as a very sweet side plot in Supergiant's deeply horny roguelite Hades. In Europe, during the Middle Ages, a fear of witchcraft and hatred of women in general led to the belief that witches were possessed of insatiable lust which could only be fulfilled by copulating with demons. Gianfrancesco Pico della Mirandola's 1523 book Strix Siva de Ludificazione Daemonum, or The Witch, that Latin's probably wrong, but you know what? Not a classics major, specifically focuses on the intense pleasure witches supposedly derive from their demonic sexual encounters, in part because, and I swear this is what he says, their virile members are of uncommon size, which is maybe the biggest self-report I've ever heard in my life. Like, got a big virile member? Must be a demon. But fear not, heterosexual demon-loving men. Heterosexual demon-loving women weren't having all the fun. According to our pal Gianfrancesco, the most down-bad little freak in history, men who got it on with a succubus too many times could literally shrivel up and die from all that good demon smashing. Obviously, this was a total load of Cretan bull, but the narrative couldn't be clearer. Hooking up with demons is superior to hooking up with humans, even if the whole thing was construed by the church as a means to prove the demons existed amongst and regularly interacted with humans. Of course, we're very clever here at GameSpot, but far from the first people to notice that folks get horned up for horned beasts. Writer/researcher Ella Gallego took a voluntary survey of over 2,000 respondents from various backgrounds and identities. The goal of the aptly named Monstrous Desire study was to analyze the inner workings of people who have ever found themselves attracted to monsters in media and pop culture. The findings are, according to Gallego, not a cohesive or comprehensive ethnography yet, thanks to the overwhelmingly white, female, and North American demographics of the respondents. However, there's still a ton of really valuable data in this study, which sheds a major light on the most bangable monsters in modern culture. For example, both Gen Z and millennials, the first major monster crush was overwhelmingly identified as the Beast from Beauty and the Beast. Probably the Disney movie, but I'll allow some Ron Perlman 80s TV show for all my cuspers out there. This was, of course, by design. According to the 1991 film's animators, they didn't even really spend that much time on the prince's human design. They knew he'd be a letdown compared to the Beast, whom they'd spent 90 full minutes convincing the audience to fall in love with. If we as the viewers aren't capable of loving the Beast, then how can we ever relate to the actions of the movie's perspective character, Belle? The animators had no choice. They had to make us want to bang the Beast, otherwise the movie doesn't work. This actually brings us to the heart of the matter: the expanded identity of the non-human. If we look back at the Monstrous Desire study, 59.5% of respondents identified as LGBTQ+. It stands to reason that there is likely a connection between queerness and desire for relationships in video games that deviate beyond the formerly standard heterosexual variety. However, sometimes the monstrousness itself provides an intriguing alternative to the queer romances offered in games. In a 2018 Medium article by Marcos Gonzalez entitled All Too Human, Gonzalez muses on his pursuit of the female-presenting Tali in Mass Effect 2. He reasons that, as a gay man, shouldn't he be inclined to romance another human man, or perhaps more accurately, feel frustrated by the lack of option to pursue a male-male romance in earnest until Mass Effect 3. However, he soon comes to realize that the facial modeling of the human men, whom he would need to be female shepherd to pursue anyway, remind him too much of the real world and of real human interactions. In Tally, he finds an escape, an unknown whose face he can't see and who would be contaminated by his human body. So there's also a mystery around how consummating that relationship would even work. While the rest of the article contains a fascinating discussion around the ability to communally perfect love with the assistance of the online community, and truly, I recommend reading it in its entirety, it boils down to one devastating but predictable endpoint. Mass Effect 3 features a picture of Tally on Shepard's desk if you're in a relationship with her, and in that picture, she is decidedly human. A little bit purple, but otherwise an aspirationally, conventionally attractive human woman, one you could find in a frame waiting to be purchased at your local HomeGoods. The beast's underwhelming prince form in an idealized female gaze-geared package, Tally's ambiguous humanity, her alienness, the very thing that helped Gonzalez escape the impositions of Mass Effect's mandated heterosexuality, had been taken from him. This is the crux of where Starfield's romance fell flat for me. Like in Skyrim, you can go so far as to actually marry your chosen romantic partner, but they're all annoyingly human. I found no allure to Sarah's hard-earned respect, or Sam's admirable people-over-protocol approach to living, Andrea's air of mystery, or Barrett's obsession with discovery. While I could flirt fairly shamelessly, sexual advances were often met with real-world hang-ups about the right time and place or coy deflection.
Although I'm flattered that you think of me that way, there's a time and a place for that sort of talk. This is definitely not one of them.
While Starfield presents a future full of possibilities that become realities as we expand beyond the limitations of Earth, but it's also one wherein humans' relationship to sexuality, while open and accepting when it comes to same-sex relationships, is still limited by views of what is and is not safe for work, so to speak. Fortunately, plenty of other games released over the last decade have transcended these real-world limitations. While in 2014's Dragon Age Inquisition, Iron Bull, the battle-hardened Ben Hassrath Kunari spy, was the only companion character who can be romanced by an Inquisitor of any race or gender, he perfectly embodied the freedom found in the non-human lover. Difficult to piss off, pro-Templar mage independence, open conversationalist who you can get serious with simply by asking him to be your boo, slaying a dragon, and crafting a necklace from its tooth. Okay, the dragon slaying part might be a little extra, but what I'm saying is that Iron Bull, a hulking, horned beast, has your back, trusts you to make your own choices, and doesn't play games when it comes to sex and romance. He's the ideal partner, completely detached from any of humanity's bullshit. In Baldur's Gate 3, every character can be romanced by anyone, regardless of race or gender, and there aren't even universally negative consequences for romancing multiple characters. A dialogue box in Hades literally tells you that it's completely fine to be in a throuple with a death god and a fury, and that it's also perfectly okay if you don't want to do that. When more games allow people to be who they want to be, and yes, bang whatever monsters they want, they provide players with the opportunity to escape from reality while staying true to who they are. Being attracted to monsters is not necessarily about the monsters themselves, although, don't get me wrong, there are sexier monsters than others. But he's actually an alien, and I cannot stress to you enough how hot I find Garrus. Rather, it's about finding a safe space to explore your sexuality where your desires are focused entirely on the unknown. There's a reason that the Monstrous Desires survey received such an overwhelmingly female response. Think back on those women who were once vilified as witches for the crime of having sex, and unfortunately, misogyny didn't die with the witch hunters. For years, women have been creating ways to covertly interact with their sexuality. The boys' love, or shonenai subgenre of manga that emerged in the 1970s aimed at young women written by women was a product of this. Since these love stories focused on two, usually young and very pretty men, they allowed for more freedom of expression in erotic encounters that were seen as largely taboo for women, but since there were no women involved visibly, it was okay. A safe space for young women to engage in sexual fantasy. Monsters, in spite of appearances, provide a similar, if not even greater kind of safety. An opportunity for people of myriad backgrounds and lifestyles, people who've been othered for their desires, to explore those desires free of the confines and criticisms of the real world. There's no sexual depravity in Monstrous Desire, but simply a wish to experience a reality different from our own, where things like Gender and sexuality and monogamy are fluid so we can better understand ourselves. Now, if you'll excuse me, I'm gonna be heading back into Baldur's Gate. I've got a bear to
Daddy Halson, they call me. Who am I to tell them otherwise?